Well, thanks everyone for staying awake and bearing with us here as we're the last panel between you and lunch. I'm Adrian Piermine with STV. For those who either might have known us before or went onto our website to understand who STV is, you'll read about the 100-year-old company that's been doing infrastructure projects, rail, heavy rail, light rail, vehicles, airports, you name it. But those of you who came to get to know us today have been hearing a whole lot about data and technology side of our practice. I've got one foot in each of those camps. I lead up the western side of our practice around new emerging mobility. And that's what we'll be talking about today. I'll be having my panelists introduce themselves shortly. Kevin, I'm going to have you go last so that we do a handful of slides to get us started, and then a handful of slides probably about halfway through our presentation just to mix things up a little bit. So I'm going to talk about, if I can figure out how to use this, so from our perspective, infrastructure nowadays is not just the heavy rail and light rail. We're looking at all things emerging mobility. And we will be talking a lot more about how this fits into the urban and beyond context in our panel here. I'm going to start us off with setting the tone a little bit around what I call the third revolution of mobility. So what is this third revolution? First, prior to the first revolution, walking, horse and buggy, and bicycle were the way that people got from here to there for a very, very long time. Then we had our first revolution of mobility. And I'm going to be focusing a little bit more around the car side of this, not air travel today. But how quickly did this first revolution of mobility, where for hundreds of years and thousands of years and all of society up until this revolution, we had been getting around on foot. This slide helps tell a bit of a story. On the left-hand slide, in both images here, we're looking at Easter Day parades in New York City. On the left-hand side, this is all horse and buggy in New York City with one car on the road. On the right-hand side, it's all cars with one horse and buggy on the road. First picture was taken in 1900. The second one was taken 13 years later. So it gives you a sense for how quickly things changed with that first revolution of mobility. In the planning world, and many of the folks here who do long-range planning around infrastructure, we're talking decades. And this is less than 15 years went through that quick of a transformation. Second revolution of mobility that we talk about is the building out of our freeway system. Not quite as quick. This took a few decades, and if you want to get something this big done quickly, you make it a defense act, where we spend a lot of money and build things really quickly. We have a lot of detrimental impacts associated with the building out of our freeway system, and we won't get into all of the equity issues here other than to think a little bit about the types of neighborhoods that were bulldozed over and the issues that we have been trying to undo when we built this infrastructure. And what we saw in these first two revolutions of mobility is they happened very quickly, and they kind of happened to us. We basically built our infrastructure around the technology. We built it around the car, and we built our cities and our roadways around the car. As we enter this third revolution of mobility, we're talking autonomous, connected, electric, shared mobility. We've been talking a lot about big data and the use of data and digital twins. Within the shared category, we can be talking about e-bikes and scooters and all kinds of new modal choices. And really, it's the convergence of these, of all of these new emerging technologies that are happening that's once again drastically going to change the way that people get from point A to point B. And it may very well be in that same sort of 15 to 20 year time frame that we see massive change in the way people get from here, point A to point B. So hopefully, we won't act 10 to 15 years from now surprised that this happened. This is our opportunity to learn from those first two revolutions and instead say, let's not design the infrastructure around the technology. Let's not design it around the car. Let's not design it around autonomous shuttles or scooters or whatever else specifically. Let's figure out what we want our cities and our communities to look like, and then let's make this technology work for us. So that's going to be kind of the tone of our chat today. We're going to hear from very different perspectives of what this means to their agency and to them individually, our panelists here. So why don't we start on the far end?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sean Keene. I'm the Parking and Mobility Services Manager for Oak Park, Illinois. So for those not familiar with Chicagoland, Oak Park is really right west of here, about 7 or 8 miles west of downtown Chicago. We have about 57,000 residents within 4.1 square miles. So we are extremely dense and populated. And so obviously parking is one of our biggest challenges. I hate to even acknowledge the reference, but we're often called No Park, Oak Park. And so we really do grapple with the challenges of operating our parking system. So my team really oversees the entire public parking system in the village. So we have a pretty complex residential parking system with permits and passes. We have upwards of 90 surface parking lots, 4 multi-level parking structures, and then just a variety of other programs that we run out of the village. The other component that my division oversees is the electric vehicle infrastructure. So currently, Oak Park has 30 level 2 ports available to the public, and we're looking to rapidly expand that really over the next 2 years and beyond. So that's kind of the work I've been working on in that space, and happy to be here with all of you.
Thank you. And I've got some questions I'll be asking you a little bit beyond parking and in EV. Neha?
This works. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm Neha Soni. I'm a senior planner with Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways, Bureau of Strategic Planning and Policy. I recently joined Cook County early this year, and prior to that, I worked as a consultant, and my background is in architecture, urban design, physical planning, physical infrastructure. And what excites me about my work is, bringing together the technological design and planning solutions together to create built environment that is, reflective of the needs and aspirations of people. Much of my recent work is focused on resilient transportation solutions in response to our current urban challenges. And, looking at this, really quick, wonderful presentation, that gives us a perspective on how fast the technology is changing and, my role and my department role in terms of providing the physical infrastructure, designing it. The technology is not happening in a vacuum. So it has to also move at a pace to catch up with the fast technology and the newer mobility solutions on our streets, which will be out there. And it's always so difficult to predict what will be out there on our streets, like 10 years from now or 20 years from now. And one of the challenges for us as in terms of physical planning and designing is a lot of these transportation projects are multi-jurisdictional. So, there is that challenge. A lot of these projects have several years of project timeline. And it also goes through various sources of funding. So there's a different source of funding, let's say in the initial planning and feasibility stage, and then the phase 1 and phase 2 meeting all of these regulations and the processes. So it works at a very different pace compared to a lot of the technology that market driven, and it moves at a much faster pace. So, but also it makes it very interesting to work. How do we constantly keep evolving that physical space. How do we make it flexible and adaptable to those unpredictable changes that will be out there? Um, Also, when we look at this big picture over so many decades, one of the recent EPA report, it shows that the transportation sector is the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And if you look at the Chicago region, again, within transportation sector, it is really the light duty vehicles, which are our passenger cars, which are the biggest emitters. So what can we do about that? If we, referring to CMAP data from 2010 to 2019, transportation sector emissions increased by 2%, while all other sectors declined. And if we look at that in perspective to, VMT, which is the vehicle mile traveled, that increased by 4% as well. So, and interestingly, when we look at a lot of these trips are within 3 to 5 mile one-way travel distances, which are, for example, which are much comfortable distances to bike or walk or use new forms of mobility choices if the appropriate infrastructure is in place. So, that's where, my organization, as Cook County and the Department of Transportation and Highways, we have launched our first bike plan ever. And, that helps, prepare the county when, this newer technologies is going to get launched on our streets. And it has like 3 guiding principles, like, we want to increase everyday bicycling. We want to create a much connected, visually connected, and seamless, low-stress network. So low-stress means when a person is out biking, feels less stressed about, and there is little risk of being hit by a motor vehicle. And the third guiding principle is that we also want to invest equitably. So, not all communities are equal. And when we see a lot of this investment that goes into, especially suburban Cook County, it's not proportionately allocated. There's historically disinvestment. So Cook County is working actively to also correct those inequities. So these are like the broader, one way to address this climate change and, reduce this environmental impact. And we have a lot of other programs, and I'll be happy to talk about more as we go along.
Thank you. And Lindsay, I didn't even have you sit in this order intentionally, but it's a nice segue, right, to not know that you're the only one up here. It's not just about technology. Please.
So I did kind of warn Adrian that I sometimes consider myself a bit of a Luddite when it comes to the new technologies. I like to keep it simple, walking, biking, rolling. Let's focus on safety and how all these issues are connected. So my name is Lindsay Bailey, and I'm the program lead for Safe and Complete Streets at our Regional Planning Association, Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, CMAP for short, as Neha mentioned. And right now, my main focus is on working with a federal grant that we received, I guess it was a year and a half ago, through the Safe Streets and Roads for All programs. We got about $4 million, and we are developing safety action plans for 6 counties around Chicago. And we're hoping that with the development of these plans, we'll be able to identify through data what are main challenges to getting people moving around our region safely. And I really love the focus that Adrian put on, let's think about what we want our cities and communities to look like and to feel like, and then we can think about how we design the system that works within our desires. And that's really what my agency does. We do long-range planning, thinking about the longer-term future. We don't know what's coming down next. So I'm excited to join the rest of the folks here.
Great. So I was telling Anna that several years ago, probably 8 or 9 years ago, I was giving a presentation to the Oregon Department of Transportation, where I come from, about all of the great new emerging connected, autonomous, shared electric, all the new technologies that are coming. And they very politely said, "That's great, Adrian, that's exciting. That's going to happen to Portland and maybe Salem and Eugene and some other. We're ODOT. We have to think about the entire rest of the state." And they didn't put it in quite these terms, but it was like, we want to make sure that mobility and transportation doesn't become the next digital divide for the rest of our state. So it's not just about what happens in the urban centers, is it?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, no, definitely. So, as Adrian mentioned, my name is Anna, and my official title is the GIS specialist for McLean County government. However, I serve more as the coordinator for licensing, servers, database management, data uploads to the website. But most importantly, I serve as a GIS support for various departments, and one of those key departments being the McLean County Regional Planning Commission. So they are the metropolitan planning agency for the Bloomington Normal area, and while they do several plans, a lot of their heavy emphasis is transportation. So McLean County is about 2.5 hours south of here. It is one of the largest, if not, I believe, the largest county in Illinois by square mileage. However, really the only populated area is Bloomington Normal, where Illinois State University is located. A lot of the other land is just more secluded, isolated farmlands, smaller communities. So a lot of our focus right now is how to reach out to those small communities and really taking a realistic look as to what they need. A lot of the people in these communities are older, and they're not exactly trying to commute to downtown Bloomington to work. A lot of it is going for routine medical examinations or dialysis. And furthermore, these people are not really interested in downloading a billion apps to try to call whatever service there might be. So we want to obviously have resources for these people. So just kind of seeing where the population is, what the needs are, is mainly our main focus right now.
But it is home to the Rivian plant, and I do love my electric SUV. So
Yes, it is.
Kevin, you're up next. You have a couple slides here. I can either advance them for you, or I can give this to you, the big green button, whatever is.
If you don't mind advancing.
I don't mind at all.
Thanks, Adrian. Kevin Campbell, Director of Maintenance Operations for the City of Chicago, Department of Fleet and Facility Management. I've been overseeing the vehicle acquisitions for all city departments for the last 24 years. And as such, I am now tasked with replacing all of those vehicles with EVs over the next 9 years. So I will show you where we are and how far we've come, and then we can spend a little time during the rest of the session talking about how we're going to get to where we need to be. So if you don't mind, the next slide, please. So we have been very involved in green fleet initiatives for a long time. We have almost 2,000 E85 vehicles. We have natural gas vehicles, which we are fueling through our partnership with Ozinga. So those are running off of renewable natural gas. 70 of those vehicles right now, 41,000 gallon equivalents dispensed in 2023. We have well over 1,000 hybrid vehicles, 59 of which are plug-in hybrids. And then the battery electric, we have 200 light duty and 2 medium duty. Those are powered by 200 level 2 charging stations. And then we also have 2 DC fast chargers. We're looking to expand that up to at least 10 in the next few years. I feel that DC fast charging is going to be a very important part of our electrification efforts. Now, while we have one of the largest EV fleets in the area, that is about 2% of our total fleet. So we have a long, long way to go in that. We can go ahead to the next slide. So Chicago's Climate Action Plan was published in July of 2022. It provides that vision to incorporate, EVs, but also to be comprehensive and to look at mobility services and technologies and the comprehensive transportation network. As someone in a previous panel said, none of us are operating in a vacuum. We're all together. We're cohabitating this space, whether it's city, county, other government agencies, private citizens, businesses. We're all sharing this space. And that to me is one of the big questions. How do we advance forward and promote these technologies in a way that everyone has access to them and that we're using them in a fair and efficient manner? And so that really is the plan. end result for my department is that we do need to electrify in the next 11 years. So that's what we're trying to figure out. Is there one more slide maybe?
I think there might be a couple.
Okay, good. So there it is, 100% electrified by 2035. I put an asterisk there. We've been talking to other agencies, most notably New York, who really gave us some good input that, they're claiming they're getting very close to 100% electrification, but they have significant carve-outs. So ambulances, nobody's expecting their ambulance, their fire fleet to be 100% electrified. So they're saying if they can make a justification for why, whether it's, criticality, 24/7 operation, or unavailability in the marketplace, they're counting those as exemptions. So we're probably going to do a similar type of thing. We're going to continue to invest in charging infrastructure, and we do expect autonomous vehicles to play a significant role as time moves forward. And this is our EV downtown fleet. Just a little example of a project we've worked with Millennium Parking Garage. They've given us spaces and chargers, and we are now making this available to our downtown administrative employees. As of this morning, we are using Launch Mobility, and it's going to be an online reservation system. So that's something we're really excited about, is that it's going to really promote vehicle sharing. So I look forward to our further conversations. Thank you.
Anything on that last slide?
Just really an overview of our green initiatives, most of which I think I've already discussed. Thank you.
All right, so I'll put our call to action back up there as just a reminder as we go through the rest of the discussion. So, Sean, I want to come back to the issues that you're dealing with a small geographic but very dense community with very little parking, as you mentioned. And a lot of the issues that you're dealing with, I think will resonate quite a bit with Chicago, at least in certain neighborhoods. So let's talk about a couple things. Curb management and maybe micromobility and connections into public transit.
Yeah, absolutely. So Oak Park, again, very close to the city, very connected. We have the Blue Line, Green Line, and Metro lines to and from Chicago. So we're always trying to keep in mind micromobility initiatives. The village previously did have a divvy system that was disbanded in 2018. A lot has changed, though, in the bike share industry, and so we've started to re-engage with companies like Lyft and others about bike share and how that could come back to Oak Park. And we've also talked with our friends at Cook County about initiatives that they're planning in terms of more county-wide bike share. And so we're really excited about the prospect of that. We're kind of working it into the village's bike plan update that we're working on with our Transportation Commission. So very excited about that. Looking at EV infrastructure specifically, so just getting back to that, Oak Park was pretty much fully developed by 1940. And so vehicle ownership obviously wasn't at the levels that it is today. So, looking at EV adoption and barriers to EV adoption, we're really trying to focus on our residents that don't have private parking, which is over 50% of our population. And so we're making sure that, living in a multifamily building, not having access to a parking garage or a charging station doesn't limit that individual from converting to an EV. And so we're really focusing, again, on building out our public infrastructure, which I know, Chicago isn't so focused on public charging right now, more so their fleet side, which we're also working on in Oak Park. But really, we have some pretty aggressive goals that are outlined in our climate action plan, including carbon neutrality by 2050. And again, a quarter of our carbon emissions are estimated to be from, personal vehicles. And so it all kind of ties together. Again, my focus is more on the public side, but we're certainly also looking at electrifying our fleet too.
Okay. Either of you have anything on curb management or anything that you wanted to mention, and then I'm going to come back on mobility hubs in just a second. So we'll keep that one separate.
Sure, I can talk a little bit about curb management. I also am a co-founder of the Parking Reform Network, which is a nonprofit looking to help the public understand the impacts of parking policy on our sustainability and transport movement and so many different issues, housing affordability. But most frequently in our communities, when we identify that there's a parking problem, people think it's a lack of available parking. And you will find that there's often going to be parking that's a little further away that you have to walk to. And if we were to use parking management like Oak Park does, where you have meters that you charge a certain amount that will incentivize people to either park further or make their trip shorter, then you can have better management on the street so that your spaces aren't all filled. And then the problem isn't that there isn't enough parking, it's just that you have to pay for it. And when people are asked to pay what parking actually costs, they often choose other modes of transport to get around. So thinking about all these different things of how much it costs and how people get around, it's all connected.
Well, one of the things that we had started to see even pre-pandemic, but certainly saw a lot of in pandemic was goods movement changing, and the use of curb for pickup and drop off of goods. Again, we had already started to see those trends. They really took off. So that's another issue when it comes to managing the curb. Do you want to talk a little bit about the county and goods movement and that side, that hat that you also wear?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for that question. I'm really loving hearing everybody's, what they're doing here. So one of the recent work that Cook County has partnered with RTA and Shared Use Mobility Center is developing Chicago region's first mobility hub framework. The network framework for the region. And so the outcome of the study will produce a framework and a policy report for 6 county of RTA service area, as well as piloting some of the mobility hubs for Chicago for Cook County region. So, chiming with, pretty much what here, everyone spoke about. Mobility Hub is, one of that physical manifestation of, how do we respond to this new mobility solutions and technology that will be out there. It includes features like being close to transit hubs like bus stops or railway stations. It has charging stations for electric vehicles. It can have some of the secured parking for shared vehicles or van pool or similar other micro mobility share as well, like bikes and scooters. It can also have, curbside management. We have to think about, how that would impact mobility hub. And again, also we have to think about, this as public space. There's a qualitative aspect to it as well. So how does that tie in with some of the existing community facilities or public services like, a small park or daycare center or senior care or health clinic or public library. So again, we also do not want to create a mobility hub and have a design which is, we just see like parked cars and scooters and bikes, but, make it a public space as well. So this, mobility hub is also provides that advantage of, making transit seamless. Like, we have CTA, Metra, and Amtrak, and so many railroads in Cook County. So, how do we also respond to making this transit seamless? Also, fare integration is also, how do we make things where people can share fare, whether boarding CTA or a Metra train. It also, goes so well with the bike plan. So it's not transit or bike or walking, but it's actually, bringing and integrating all different modes of transportation together. So it's about, when we talk about the first mile and the last mile in transit, Mobility Hub provides that one of that it's one of the solutions where, it provides that answer to a person, getting from hub to one's final destination or the origin. So it does have, a component of equity as well. Earlier when we talked about a digital divide, it kind of can also help, bring equity in accessing some of these facilities and services. So, how do we respond to equity through transportation improvements? So it's like one of the ways where, we can think about responding to the new mobilities and technology that will be out there.
So, and when I would talk again to my urban clients, these are the issues that they're talking about. And one of the benefits to being able to offer multimodal choices and connect all these trips with first and last mile and mobility hubs and then public transportation is allowing families to give up one of two cars or even give up the car entirely. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that the car costs on average $10,000 to $12,000 a year for a family to own and maintain, and is parked 94 to 96% of the time. That's a pretty bad investment, and for families that are living more on the margins financially, that's a big deal. But when you get out of the urban center, it's a different set of issues, and a lot of the urban clients that I've talked to, we're getting Uber and Lyft and all these other companies that want to come to us, and scooters, and they want to come to us, and we don't know how to manage this. And I talk to my more rural clients, we're not having that problem. We're having the problem of trying to get some of that interest here. Tell us a little bit about your story there.
Yeah, I wish I could come to you all and say, hey, we found a solution that definitely works. Right now, we're just more in the stages of trying to see, that kind of works, or maybe we can tweak this a little bit here. Right now, our rural communities are really relying a bit more on show bus. So as it works right now, it's a couple of kind of smaller, like not school bus, like a small, like maybe like a tour bus. You call it a day in advance, say, hey, I have an appointment at Carl Hospital tomorrow 9 a.m. Can you pick me up? And then the bus appears. But one of the biggest issues we're having right now is that the buses are very, very old. So it is in need of constant repairs, and we are trying to find funding. Well, first of all, to keep show bus running in general. So even though it's technically government funded, it is based more on population. So when your population is nowhere near that of Cook County, then you do tend to get kind of overlooked. And the second issue with that is also funding the information for the show bus in general. So you'd actually be surprised how few people actually know that that is an option that they actually have. So you call a number, maybe somebody picks up, you schedule it, and that's that. So we're trying to right now just kind of have more focus groups and focus more on transportation plans aimed at the smaller communities. So kind of do a 2-in-1 hey, what are your transportation needs? Also, this is a thing. So it's been interesting. Also just kind of public engagement as well, just trying to get people to show up to the public meetings in general. And it is a completely different lifestyle. A lot of the people out there start work early. So you're talking 6:30, 7 a.m. They're usually home and not really leave after 6 p.m. So if you're trying to plan a city meeting at 7 p.m., you might get 1 or 2 people to show up, which is kind of, not ideal. So yeah, just kind of exploring more. I guess in a way it kind of does act like an Uber, except you have to call or plan it very well in advance. But yeah, I was just kind of looking to different solutions. So yeah.
I'm going to ask Kevin one more question, very specific on the EV charging stuff, and then I want to wrap up with where funding opportunities are in the near term, and when we see maybe the end of Jobs Act and potentially a bit of a cliff of some of the funding that we've had access to, what sort of sustainability models you might be looking at and thinking about. So I'm giving you some time to formulate some thoughts, because we'll end up with that. But Kevin, Sean mentioned that the city's focused, primarily on fleet, which of course it is, and as you talked about. But what I've heard from a number of my clients, and I think you even mentioned this when we were talking before this, that a lot of clients are recognizing we're making a heavy investment in fast charging infrastructure. This stuff is not cheap, and we're using taxpayer dollars and/or grant funding, whatever else. But it's used in certain periods of the day very heavily. What kind of opportunities are there to make this investment in that charging infrastructure, use it for our fleet needs, but then potentially open it up to the traveling public?
Sure. So I do want to start by saying now the city is definitely looking at all of these different aspects of how we can make these services available to the public. But me, I work at fleet, so I'm only really focusing on the city's fleet. That being said, I'm really interested in figuring out ways we can share. An example of a success story that we have is Zipcar. We've been using Zipcar since 2011. Our usage profile is very heavy during the workday. The general public is usually evenings and weekends. So it's been a great partnership. We've been able to share vehicles with the public through Zipcar. We're looking to expand that by adding locations at libraries and public housing. And along that same model, I had mentioned, using Ozinga for natural gas. We really think charging as a service is going to be an integral part of our total solution. And so we're hoping there's going to be some public company that opens a fast charging depot and it's available to the public. We would be an anchor tenant to that. We would be a very heavy user. We don't want to be a resource hog. We want to be a good partner and allow that also to be shared with the public. But those are the types of partnerships where I feel it's going to be beneficial to the city. It's going to be beneficial to the community. And then it would also hopefully be profitable to a company.
Great. So our utility partners, we had a lot of earlier discussions around that. Maybe there's some mixing and matching opportunities here for that. Okay, quick answers because we're down to our last 2 minutes, and then let's get everyone out to lunch. Anyone have any great answers for your peer agencies out here around funding, both near-term and more sustainable models?
I'm going to start with thinking about what we're spending and the annual costs of maintenance of the roadways. And as we expand them, that just adds to the backlog of how much you have to maintain. And if you think about moving people in mass transit, on bicycles, the needs for infrastructure are going to be a lot smaller. If you think about compact development, the infrastructure costs for your pipes, your water, your sewer, that's going to be a lot smaller. So a parking lot, it's not generating much in the way of funds for your community. Whereas if you had shopping, housing, all on that same lot, you have more tax generating land uses. So thinking about the return on investment for every dollar you're investing in micromobility, people walking, biking, accessible streetways and sidewalks, will get that return on investment. We need it. And I think electric bicycles will be a solution in many communities, even rural communities. They could be a real game changer for getting people around conveniently.
Well, just a last thought. So, they say like if we have unlimited budget, we can solve all of the problems, or at least most of the problems. So, it's important that we stretch the dollars and make right decisions and investment. So there was this really, interesting number that I ran in my previous role. So if we have $10 million, what can we do with it? So we ran a number and we looked at, roadways. We can construct a mile of two-way lane roadway, or we can construct about 10 miles of side path, which is off-street, going along with the roadway, or we can actually get 50 miles of bike lane on an existing roadway. So, these choices are with us, and, resiliency is about doing more with less resources. And, so how we invest in our infrastructure in the future, which are, low emissions travel choices, also the transportation that works for people of all ages and abilities for different communities. And, that's why thinking through funding programs and how we invest and where we invest is very critical to what we do.
And on that note, I think, Ken, we'll hand it back to you to take us off to lunch, or do we just take us off to lunch? Thank you, everybody.